So this is Philippians 4, the scripture for February 13th. One of the most dangerous practices that a Christian can have is the practice of constructing a very careful, very methodical theology that doesn't actually get applied to real life, to real flesh and blood human beings. And this is why at the beginning of this chapter in Philippians 4, Paul names two women, Euodia and Syntyche, as people who need to reconcile. Because knowledge is entirely unhelpful if it doesn't lead to action. And if these people call themselves Christians, then they need to understand they're working for the same God and they are the same team. If we believe in forgiveness, or say we do, but we don't actually practice it, then I'd say we don't actually believe in it. One illustration that I found really helpful is that of a triangle, where you consider God as the top vertex and you and neighbor as the bottom two vertices. As you go closer and closer to God, those who are also growing closer and closer to God need to grow closer to you as well. You can't grow closer to God while going away from other people. This is what theology ought to lead us to: a better relationship with God and a better relationship with neighbor. It's the peace of God that Paul says guards our hearts and guards our minds. Now, I know that I don't always think of peace as a guard, but peace isn't the absence of conflict. That's part of the idea of it, but sometimes peace or wholeness, or as the Hebrews would put it, shalom, peace needs to allow for conflict in order for true peace to happen. You've experienced, I'm sure, sitting around a dinner table knowing the unspoken conflict that simmers below the surface. And at a surface level, there's peace. You're not outwardly fighting with one another, but you know that there's this underlying conflict that's there that colors the whole situation. Sometimes the most peaceful thing to do is acknowledge the conflict, maybe even allow the conflict to simmer or to vent a little bit, and then to reconcile with the other person and to remind the other person, look, I love you in spite of this conflict, maybe even because of this conflict. And it's God's wholeness, God's true shalom, God's working to make everything right with the world. That's what guards our hearts, our emotions, along with our minds, our thoughts. When we find ourselves fearing what the world's going to become, it's God's promise of peace that brings us back and guards our hearts and guards our minds. Now, when I was younger, I played baseball. It was one of my favorite sports. And my coaches would always emphasize the importance of taking mental reps, trying to make sure that you're mentally prepared for what you're about to do. One of the places they really insisted on taking mental reps was batting. So when you're the next person up and you're getting ready to go up into the batter's box, it's important for you to take a few practice swings to try and get the timing of the speed of the pitch down. You're supposed to imagine yourself in the batter's box right then and try and time your swing to the pitcher's speed. These mental reps are crucial, and that's why Paul says to think about things that are praiseworthy, because the more we find ourselves taking mental reps about things that are praiseworthy, the more we'll be able to see things that are praiseworthy over and over in our daily lives. How we train our minds to think matters. And the more we look for praiseworthy things, the more we're going to see them. Just the same way as the more that I time my swing to the speed of the pitcher, the more likely it'll be that I'm going to be able to make contact with the baseball. The last thing that Paul talks about in this letter is how grateful he is for the generosity the Philippians have shown him. But he's even more grateful for the provision that God offers. And he spends a little bit of time saying how, it's great for you to give this to me. I didn't actually need it, but it helped to bless both me and you. And I think this shows that it's important to make sure that God's ministry is open to anyone who wants to take leadership and anyone who wants to take part. That if you share ministry opportunities with other people, even if other people don't come through for you, God's work will still happen. And at least then you've given other people the opportunity to do God's work and to share in God's blessings. So what do you need to take mental reps on? Where are the areas that you need to train your mind to think? And are there people you need to reconcile with? That's all for Philippians 4, and that actually concludes Paul's letter to the Philippians. Tomorrow, February 14th, in addition to being Valentine's Day, we'll begin Paul's letter to the Colossians. May God bless you in your reading of Scripture.